Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you have found us in the middle of an inspiring conversation. We're discussing juvenile reformation or underage, for underage defenders, that is. Kefa, there's something that you mentioned earlier that I want to pick a little bit on, that our legal systems do not allow rehabilitation, or rather restoration, should I say, back into society. Tell us more about that and probably what it is that can be done.
Now, the unfortunate bit is that the law does not care about your life after. You see, the law only cares about your relationship with other people. About yourself, they don't care what happens to you next. You look at how these laws were made. You know, in 1945, when the bourgeois or the white settlers decided to implement these rules, the punitive measures was only, or the intention was to implement them against the black. So that it was to punish the blacks, and they didn't care much what happens to them after. For instance, if you refuse to work in the white, the white settlers' farms, then the penalty will be there for you. You will be punished, and nothing, they will not care much about your life thereafter. Now, unfortunately, we imported this penal code, and we maintained the system after that, even when, they had moved, or when the colonization had been taken, we had, proceeded as a country. But now, the criminal aspect, the penal code, you realize that not much has changed in that. So that it is a system that ideally do not care much about what happens to the convict after that. So that we have focused much on the retributive part and the deterrence part, but not the restoration part. It is a system that I don't know what we can do about it, but maybe if we start adopting what Canada is doing, what even Egypt is doing right now, so that the government ensures that there is specific funds, in fact, a ministry of its own, you see, that deals with rehabilitation of young people or even the convicts back to society.
What is Canada and Egypt doing that Kenya can borrow from?
The Canada has a system that when a person has undergone sentencing process and they're out, you realize that their life in a way has retrogressed. They have been backward compared to their peers who are in the free space. So that the government takes an initiative first to give them the opportunity to start, picking up their life where it was, by employing them in their own sectors, paying them and putting them on probation. When they're done with the probation, they allow them now to be absorbed in the free market like other persons, you see.
Speaking of being, right, continue.
But now the problem here we have is once you're convicted in Kenya, it is a public, record. So that any employer that comes, there are certain jobs. In fact, when you look at even the advertisement, you'll see even employers saying, should not have a criminal record in their list. You see, what happens to you? And we also know as advocates that people were convicted, but ideally they were innocent, maybe because they lacked representation or because facts were not clear before the court.
So what does that say when employers, when the industrialization sector says that they cannot hire people who do not have a criminal record? What does that say about our private sector and just employment in general? And should the government make that illegal, where certain institutions cannot say that you cannot hire? In fact, it should be the opposite, that one or two people within your institution should have a criminal record, because how do they get back into society? No, for real. It's the same way that legally, institutions are supposed to have a person living with disability within. It's an employment law. So how is it that if we do not make it an employment law, if our own government cannot make it an employment law, how is it that institutions, both the private and public sector, will not follow it? So you have this young person who is angered, who is confused, who is unemployed. They would just stick it to crime, because how will they fend for themselves and their loved ones?
You see, they say criminal cause. Criminal is not a cause. It is a choice, you see. So that when people decide to engage in criminal acts, it's a choice they've decided. Nobody wants to work with a criminal. Even yourself, you not want to work with a person who has been charged with robbery with violence. That is why the only way to help sensitize this, that the government should first absorb these people.
Right.
You see, after absorbing them on a probation basis and pay them the advance. Once they're clean, it's the government now to censor the public that now we have fresh, mentored, and people that have passed this stage, they can't work in any position. That is the system that the Canadians are using right now, you see, because everybody will be scared just to employ somebody from prison. Man, you want to die.
Susan, please comment on that. Please comment on that, and how we can begin to break that stereotype where we are saying that even though person XYZ were once in jail, they came out, they're being reformed, they have a track record from psychologists and counselors to show that they are behaved. They come for sessions, they are participating, their family and their loved ones are involved in that process of rehabilitation, to just give confidence to employers to say that even though you're hiring an ex-convict, they are improving, and here's their track record.
Right. I also had an advantage of visiting the US, and the Bridges of America has over 17 institutions in the US, and they have very, very beautiful ex-convict rehabilitation facilities. When you serve your sentence, or they can even put you there as you continue serving your sentence, they get to know who you are. There's occupational therapy, maybe for somebody who cannot go back to the employment they used to have. There's a lot of counseling that goes on. There's a lot of trauma. Even John is still processing some of the things he went through when he was actually put in prison, especially partly with the adults. So at the end of the day, you realize we should have an integrated, and it's possible. I always say where the government is willing, it can do it. Because even that Boston Institution for Girls within community prisons, if you look at it, it's a state of the art, you know? But there are only 47 girls in there at the moment. How many other girls are in other prison facilities? And I feel uncomfortable when I call them prisons, because now I know where that came from. Because it's like you put people there to deny them freedom. It's nothing more. You have imprisoned their mind, you have imprisoned their thinking, you have imprisoned their future. So I think even the way we call them prisons, we need to change. And to me, it's a paradigm shift all the way. Criminal justice, legal justice, and even our lawmakers. We need to think. It's not about the crime I have committed. Think about me as well. Then we can talk about justice. And if you look at the motto of all the correctional facilities, they talk of kurekebisha na haki. But kurekebisha na haki, in the real sense, is not practical. Because most of them go in, maybe I was a petty offender, but by the time I'm getting out, I'm worse. What happened in there? Did you really correct my thinking? And what I've found in the US, they all believe, and it's true, because I've tried to do some assessment of some of the boys and girls I've worked with who are child offenders. You realize that that which lacked basically is a structure, whether it is within the community, whether it's the school system, or it's within the family system, just like Agatha was saying. So at the end of the day, you would want to help this person have a structured life. You'd also want them to have order in everything they do, should logically flow. Where am I moving from age 13 to the next level? Talking about the developmental stages. And at the end of the day, do I have the discipline to keep the behavior that I have acquired? That is where you need a psychiatrist to tell us whether this is an antisocial behavior. And even if it were, what do we need to do? We have very qualified people in this country, but they do not do what they are supposed to do because they have not been maybe identified as people who can help. Go to prisons. How many counselors are employed as counselors?
When you came back, when you left prison, we're trying to get a better term for it. Hopefully we'll get a better term as society for prison. But when you left prison, how was it getting back outside there, getting back into society?
Obviously, the society won't accept you as how you were before, because they used to see you do this, and they used to see you as a truant. So it was very hard for you, because now, every time you pass by the streets, you're always suspecting that they are talking about what you did and where you were, and they are always like, he was in prison. They are always like, this guy is not the way he used to be. And now they will be seeing you as a bad guy, not knowing that maybe there's something that you have gone through that has transformed you, or that has come into your life that can make a change.
Agatha, how can we, and I mean we, I mean as society, family, friends, in school and so forth, how can we help? Or what role do we play in making sure that underage defenders ease back into society?
I suppose the government ought to perhaps change the minimum age. If it is under 18, they need to look for an alternative way in which they can help this young person, because, as I mentioned before, this is a person who is still developing. Suppose if they raised the age to about 21, 24, this is a person who is aware of what the person is doing. Also, I think as a society, we need to urge the government to come up with policies that can help this young offender in terms of their lifestyle, instead of just thinking the alternative way is jail time. Is there any other way? You know? And also the people who are in the prisons, those counselors, those guards, are they having the proper training? You know, they could be having the 6-month training, which is good, but it takes more than that. They need to be able to understand that these are young people who are in prisons. These are people who perhaps it happened accidentally and they were just caught.
John, what was the day-to-day life in prison? You'd wake up and then take me through your day.
It was every morning when you wake up, you'd go for some training for 1 hour. There were some practices here and there. Then you go for your breakfast, that was porridge, white porridge. Then you go for cleaning. You are doing thorough cleaning in the prisons, because the prisons, in the prison, it is like it is a must that now every prison is clean. If you dump something, it must be written that something has been dumped in a way. We were doing cleaning here and there. Then afterwards, we were going for some other works. In some way, there were those who were taking some studies here and there, but most of the studies were about how you were convicted and how the court process is. Because as for me, I had 2 cases. I was serving my 4 months sentence, and I was still undergoing some other case. Now there was some training as how you can go defend yourself in the court, but that was not much there.
So you had a lawyer who would help train you guys on how to defend yourself in court?
Fortunately, no. It was, we were taken by the wardens there. We are given some books to read, which are written, and how we can go about it.
Wow, Kefa, did you hear that? These guys were given a law book to read so they can go defend themselves in court, instead of having actual lawyers to come in, hear their case and help them. So when they go to court, they can articulate their issue properly.
No, that's unfortunate. Believe me, if you read those books, you can't even understand it.
Exactly.
Because we take almost 8-9 years for us even to understand
everything.
So take an example of this, Inzi. Offense like murder, robbery with violence, attempted robbery with violence, and offense like treason, for instance. Even if you're found to be guilty and you're 10 years, what will be the sentence? Death.
Wow.
That is how harsh it is. What do we need to do as a society? Number one, we need to demystify from the subjects who are the minors and the adults, how we deal with them. Two, what I will recommend is that we need to have specific legislations, criminal legislations that handles the minors. Because ideally, when you look, in criminal law, they look at 2 things before you're sentenced. There's what we call the actus reus, the act itself. Did you beat somebody? Yes, I did, you see. And then we call what we call the intention itself, you see. So they look at the act and the intention. Was there an intention even before I hit him so that he collapsed? Yes, there was intention. I had planned to hit him, and then I actually hit him, then he collapsed and died, you see. But if I was just walking and by, unfortunately my hands swayed and, I found hitting him, I had not even planned, and then he collapsed, died. Should that be, considered as murder? And then I look at the intention of young people. Young children or the subjects, sometimes their intention was not even that. And why will we have specific legislation applying to both? It is a change that we need to do. In fact, if you look at the Sexual Offences Act, for instance, it does not demystify whether you're 15, 16, or even 30. So long as you defile a child of a specific age or whatever, the subject, the sentence applies equal to all of them.
Is there a legal body that seeks to defend underage defenders? Even though they've broken the law, yes, but they will not get a harsh sentencing, like you said, compared to someone else who has, someone beyond age.
What happens is left at the discretion of the judges and the magistrate.
Okay.
You see, that is what is happening. But the reality is that the specific legislation applies to all of them when they're found guilty. The children's court, yes. Now that is why at the children's court is at the discretion of the magistrate. So that the magistrate will say, now there's a child, whatever, I will give him the minimum sentence, you see, whatever. But the law itself, we need to have it properly written in the law. That when you're dealing with the minor, that we have, if we cannot have specific different legislation, let us have one legislation, but then this legislation should be in two parts, that this sentence applies to an adult of 18 and above, but then if it is a minor, then this should apply.
Susan,
it's happening even in South Sudan.
Has the psychology body in Kenya tried to work with the legal departments, like of
Whenever I'm asked that question, I think my emotions rise, because up to now, the Counselors and Psychologists Act was passed in 2014, but there is no national board, there is no regulatory board for us to do this work, because if it were, believe you me, I would be at the forefront. Because when I have dealt with these young people and I see them in prisons, it really breaks my heart, because majority of them, they are not there because they intended.
Right.
And even the adults, I have them as well, by the way. I think the next time you can handle adults. And you will see some of them went to jail when they were minors, right? And the circumstances. Some of them, like the sex offenses, who thinks about sex addiction or sexaholic is a condition that needs treatment before you convict somebody.
And Susan, and I'll let you have the last say as we're closing. Someone might ask, how is it as a psychologist or psychiatrist, how can you tell this person is genuinely misbehaving because there's another cause behind it, be it drugs, poverty, etc.? How do you separate someone who is misbehaving, someone who's just being naughty, and someone who is genuinely committed a crime?
So what happens, we carry out psychological assessment. And I thank God, because in Kenya right now, we're having a few institutions trying to train people in forensic psychology so that you can separate them. But when you do psychological assessment, you look at whether they have any mental disorder that exists, and is it genetic, such that you have to do more work if it's genetic. You also look at the environment, the psychosocial factors or ecological factors surrounding this young person. You also look at their personality, because my personality can make me become a criminal, and yet it is something somebody needs to help me to understand and know. You also look at the parenting. You know, when she talked about secure and insecure attachment, you realize when you bring up a child in a family where there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of maybe negative expectations, that child, even when they become an adult, you know, people just call, like, when in the love triangle, talk about drama queens. Some of them, they had very insecure attachment. So if they see you with somebody can become very violent. And in the course of the violence, they kill you. But what is the underlying issue?
Right.
That is actually our work.
John, what are you studying?
Petroleum exploration and production.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah.
Good for you. I wish you all the best.
Thank
you
you
so much for coming on set and inspiring us and inspiring other young people. I hope next time when you come, you'll be telling us about petroleum and other things.
Yeah.
All right, so that's John Njoroge. He is a reformed convict. Soon we'll be calling him a different name, right? A different title, right?
We'll be a professor.
Will be a professor, amen. And of course, I've also had Agatha Mwangi. She is a social counselor, social worker, Susan Gitawa, counseling psychologist, and of course, advocate Kefa Ojijo, helping us understand the legality of it. Thank you so much. I hope that today's conversation has inspired you to look at underage defenders in a different way, in a different light. Up next, in about an hour's time, it's Sunday edition, Kenya's morning political show right here on KTN News. I'll see you again at 1 p.m. for a quick update of stories making headlines. But for now, it's bye-bye.